I never believed in Bigfoot until the day I found one lying dead in the forests of Olympic National Park. And what I discovered connected to that creature changed everything. I thought I knew about them. Let me start from the beginning because this story needs to be told exactly as it happened. My name is Marcus Webb, and I've been a professional hunter for 23 years. Not the weekend type who goes out with friends to shoot a deer and drink beer. I'm the guy wildlife authorities call when there is a problem bear near private property or when a cougar starts wandering too close to residential areas. I track, I capture, and when necessary, I help resolve situations that pose a risk to people. It's a job that takes experience, but someone has to do it. It was mid-October 2023. Elk season had just begun in Washington state. I had a special license to hunt in a remote area of Olympic National Park, near the border with the Olympic National Forest. The region was known for its dense forests of Douglas fir and western hemlock, trees so old they'd been standing since before the Civil War. It was the kind of place you could walk for days without seeing another human being. I had parked my Ford F-250 pickup on an old logging road, abandoned for at least 30 years, covered in moss and ferns. I loaded my pack with supplies for 3 days. My 300 Winchester Model 70 rifle, extra ammunition, a first aid kit, camping tent, a sleeping bag rated for 20 degrees, a life straw water filter, Mountain House dehydrated meals, and my Garmin GPS. I also carried my K-bar hunting knife, Petzl headlamp, and walkie-talkie, though I knew I wouldn't get any radio signal for most of the trip. The plan was simple. Follow a deer trail I'd scouted 2 weeks earlier, set up camp near a small creek called Whiskey Creek, and spend 2 days tracking mature bull elk. The area was known for some truly impressive bulls, racks that could easily score high in the Boone and Crockett system. The hike to my campsite took about 4 hours. The trail climbed steadily through thick forest, crossing small streams and winding around huge fallen trees covered in bright green moss. The smell of the forest was overwhelming, a mix of damp earth, natural decay, and the sharp scent of pine. Every now and then I saw signs of wildlife, fresh deer tracks, bear claw marks on tree trunks, a few blue grouse feathers on the ground. When I finally reached Whiskey Creek around 3 in the afternoon, the sun was already starting to dip behind the mountains. I set up my camp in a small clearing about 50 yards from the creek, pitched my north face tent, organized my gear, and started a fire with some dry twigs I'd found sheltered beneath a large hemlock. Dinner was simple: dehydrated beef stroganoff mixed with hot water. I sat back in my folding camping chair, planning the next day's hunt. Night fell fast in that forest. By 6 p.m. it was pitch black. I kept the fire going, more for company than warmth, and listened to the sounds of the night. Owls calling in the distance, the occasional snap of a branch, the steady murmur of the creek. It was peaceful in a way you just don't find near civilization. Around 9, I was ready to sleep. I stored all my food in a bear-proof canister, hung it about 100 yards from camp, just as safety protocol demanded. I checked my rifle, made sure it was loaded but on safety, and set it beside me inside the tent. Then I crawled into my sleeping bag and switched off my headlamp. I must have been asleep for about 3 hours when I woke up to a smell. Not the normal scent of the forest. Something else, something wrong. It was strong, foul, the smell of decomposition, like something large had died and had been rotting nearby for days. The stench was so powerful it made me nauseous. I turned on my headlamp and checked my watch. 2:47 a.m. The fire had burned down to faint embers that barely lit the camp. I stayed inside the tent for a few minutes, listening carefully. No movement, no sounds of animals, nothing unusual, just that smell. And it seemed to be getting stronger. My first thought was that a bear had dragged a carcass close to my campsite. That would be a serious problem. Bears guarding their kills are cautious but extremely dangerous, and the last thing I wanted was to be camping near one. I knew I had to check it out, had to find out what was causing that odor. I grabbed my rifle, switched off the safety, and stepped out of the tent. The night was cold, probably around 40 degrees, and I could see my breath hanging in the air. I swept my headlamp across the camp. The trees stood like dark walls around the clearing, their branches throwing shifting shadows in the light. The smell was coming from the west, away from the creek. I started walking slowly in that direction, rifle ready, finger off the trigger, but prepared. With every step, the odor grew stronger, almost unbearable. I pulled a bandana from my pocket and tied it over my nose and mouth. It barely helped. After about 200 yards through waist-high ferns and low pine branches, I saw something large and dark lying between two massive trees. At first I thought it was a bear's, the size matched. But as I got closer and my headlamp hit it fully, I realized I was wrong. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. It was a body. A massive body covered in dark, tangled hair. It was lying on its back, long arms stretched out to the sides. And even in the weak light, even through the rot, I could clearly see what it was. It was a Bigfoot. I'd heard the stories all my life. I grew up in Washington State, where tales of Sasquatch were as common as stories about salmon or Microsoft. Everyone knew someone who'd seen one, but I never believed. I thought they were just legends, hoaxes, or misidentified bears, but there it was, lifeless on the forest floor, as real as the trees around it. I approached slowly, heart pounding. The creature had to be at least 8.5 feet tall, maybe 9. Hard to tell exactly with the body bloated and swollen from decay. Its hair was dark brown, almost black in places, graying where it had fallen out in clumps. The skin beneath was thick and dark. The face was the most shocking part. It resembled a gorilla, but not quite. Flatter, with a heavy brow ridge and a massive jaw. The eyes were sunken shut. The nose was wide and flat, and the mouth hung slightly open, revealing large teeth, some sharp like canines, others broad and human-like molars. I circled the body, keeping my distance, trying to process what I was looking at. The hands were enormous, almost the size of catcher's mitts, with long fingers and thick, dirty nails. The feet were just as massive, easily 18 inches long, with articulated toes and a structure somewhere between human and primate. Based on the state of decomposition, I estimated the creature had been there for at least a week, maybe 2. There were no obvious signs of trauma, no visible wounds, no marks suggesting a fight with another animal. But there was something strange about the abdomen. The area was more swollen than the rest of the body, distended in a way that didn't look natural. I knew I should call the authorities, report this immediately. This would be the discovery of the century, definitive proof that Bigfoot existed. But it was 3 in the morning, I was miles from any cell signal, and my walkie-talkie definitely wouldn't reach anyone from here. And then, as I stood there staring at that impossible creature, my hunter's mind began to turn. What had happened to it? Why was it here alone? And what was causing that abnormal swelling in the abdomen? That's when I remembered something I'd seen in the local news about 3 weeks earlier. A woman had gone missing in the area. Sarah Mitchell, 28, from Port Angeles. She was a hiking enthusiast, loved going out on solo trail. She'd left for a 3-day hike in Olympic National Park and never came back. King County Search and Rescue had looked for her for a whole week without finding a single trace. A terrible thought began to form in my mind. Could it be possible? Could there be a connection between her disappearance and this creature? I looked again at the distended abdomen. Something wasn't right there. And the more I looked, the more it bothered me. I had field-dressed hundreds of animals in my career. Deer, elk, bears. I knew what a body was supposed to look like after a certain amount of time. And this didn't look right. Against all my better judgment, against all logic and caution, I decided I needed to understand what was going on here. Not just out of curiosity, but because if there was any chance, any possibility, that this was connected to the disappearance of Sarah Mitchell, I had an obligation to find out. I took my cowbar knife from my belt, took a deep breath through my bandana, and steeled myself for what I was about to do. I had to know the truth. I had to understand what had happened here, and what I was about to discover would connect this creature to one of the most widely searched missing person cases in the Pacific Northwest, and would completely change our understanding of the behavior of these mysterious beings. I stood there for a full minute, just staring at that impossible creature lying on the forest floor. My hand gripped the K-bar knife, but I still didn't have the courage to do what I knew I had to do. Part of me wanted to just go back to camp, grab my gear, and get out of there as fast as possible. Leave it for the authorities to figure out. But the other part, the part that had spent 2 decades tracking and understanding wild animals, knew I had a responsibility here. If there was any chance this creature was connected to the disappearance of Sarah Mitchell, I needed to know. Families of missing people deserve answers. They deserve closure. And if I walked away without investigating, I'd never be able to live with myself. I knelt beside the body, adjusting my headlamp for the best possible lighting. The smell up close was almost unbearable, even with the bandana covering my face. I had to stop every few seconds to breathe through the corner of my mouth, trying not to gag. The abdominal area was significantly more swollen than the rest of the body. That in itself wasn't unusual. Decomposition gases often caused bloating. But there was something about the shape, about the way it was distended, that didn't seem right. It was irregular, asymmetrical, like there was something solid inside, not just gas. With slightly trembling hands, I placed the blade of my knife against the skin of the abdomen. The hide was incredibly thick, much thicker than any animal I'd ever worked with. It took more pressure than I expected to make the initial incision. When the blade finally broke through, an even fouler odor escaped, making me turn my head and cough. I made a careful cut, about 12 inches long, following the natural line of the body. The skin opened, revealing layers of tissue and muscle beneath. Everything was in an advanced state of decay, making it hard to identify specific structures. But I kept working, slowly widening the opening. That's when I started to see something that shouldn't have been there. At first, I thought it was just more decomposed tissue. But then my headlamp caught something that made my blood run cold. It was tissue, yes, but not from the Bigfoot. It was different. The texture was different. The color was different. And then I saw something that left no doubt. It was a piece of clothing. My heart began to race. Carefully, I used the tip of my knife to pull some of the material out. It was synthetic fabric, the kind used in modern hiking jackets. Bright red, or it had been before it became stained and deteriorated. And there was a small embroidered logo I could still make out, even with the damage. It was from Columbia Sportswear. I remembered the missing person posters I'd seen all over Port Angeles. Sarah Mitchell was last seen wearing a red hiking jacket, a Columbia jacket. My hands were trembling now, not from fear, but from adrenaline and a growing sense of dread. I kept examining, carefully moving the decomposed tissue aside. Then I found more evidence. Small bits of material that clearly didn't belong to the Bigfoot. A fragment that looked like denim, probably jeans. A piece of rubber that might have been from a hiking boot sole, and then something that confirmed my worst fears. Buried deeper in the stomach contents, I found something small and shiny. I used the knife to carefully pull it out and wiped it on the moss beside me. It was a pendant, a small silver heart-shaped pendant on a thin silver chain. There was an inscription on it, but it was hard to read in the dim light and under the grime. I took my water bottle from my belt, poured some over the pendant, and rubbed gently with my thumb. Slowly, the letters became visible. To Sarah, with love, Mom and Dad, 2015. I sat back on my heels, my mind racing. There was no more doubt. This creature had something to do with the disappearance of Sarah Mitchell. But how? Why? Bigfoot were supposedly peaceful creatures, avoiding humans at all costs. Every story I'd ever heard described encounters where they watched from a distance, never aggressive, never hostile. But the evidence here told a different story. A disturbing one I could barely process. I continued my investigation, working for another 30 minutes, mentally documenting everything I found. There were more fragments of clothing, more bits of hiking gear, a broken backpack buckle, part of a shoelace, a small piece of plastic that might have been from a water bottle. But what disturbed me most wasn't what I found. It was what it meant. The stomach contents didn't just show that the Bigfoot had encountered Sarah Mitchell. They showed that something terrible had happened, something that went against everything we thought we knew about these creatures. I looked again at the creature's face, trying to understand. What could have caused this? Hunger, desperation, or was something darker at play? And what had happened to the Bigfoot itself? What had brought it to this end? I examined the body again, this time looking for any signs of trauma that might explain the creature's death. There were no obvious external wounds, no bullet holes, no signs of struggle. But then I noticed something strange about the creature's mouth. Leaning in closer, I used my knife to gently pry open the jaw. The smell that came out was different from the rest, more chemical, more artificial. And then I saw something caught between the back teeth, a small piece of colored plastic, part of an energy bar wrapper. That made me think. Sarah Mitchell, like any experienced hiker, would have carried food, energy bars, trail mix, maybe even some dehydrated meals. If the Bigfoot had consumed those along with everything else, maybe something in that processed food had poisoned it. It was a theory that made some sense. Wild animals often get sick after eating human food. Their digestive systems aren't adapted to preservatives, artificial colors, and chemicals. For a creature like this, one that had probably never eaten anything but natural forest food, the effects could have been severe. But that still didn't explain the original event. What had driven the Bigfoot to do what it did? I'd spent my entire life studying predators, bears, cougars, wolves, and one thing they all have in common is that they don't attack humans without a reason. It's usually because they're injured, sick, protecting their young, or cornered, and feel threatened. I began to examine the rest of the body more carefully, looking for signs of illness or old wounds. That's when I noticed something on the creature's left hind leg. The skin there was marked and scarred, the hair growing back in uneven patches. It looked like an old wound, maybe months old. I used my knife to carefully part the hair and examine the scar more closely. It was extensive, running about 8 inches along the back of the thigh. And there was something odd about the shape of the scar. It didn't look natural. It didn't look like the kind of injury that would come from a fight with another animal or from an accident in the forest. It looked almost like a trap wound. That changed everything. If this creature had been injured by an illegal hunting trap, and there were plenty of those scattered illegally throughout these forests, that could explain an altered behavior. A wounded animal is an unpredictable one. Pain and stress can make even the most peaceful creatures act in unexpected ways. I pictured the scene in my head. The Bigfoot, already wounded and likely in chronic pain from that leg injury, encounters Sarah Mitchell on the trail. Maybe she was startled. Maybe she screamed or tried to run. That could have triggered a predatory response in the creature, especially if it was weakened and struggling to find its normal food sources. It wasn't a justification, but it was an explanation, and explanations mattered. Because if this was an isolated incident caused by specific circumstances, it didn't mean all Bigfoot were dangerous. It meant this tragic situation was a perfect storm of bad factors colliding at once. I spent a few more minutes mentally collecting every detail I could. I took the pendant and a few of the larger fragments of clothing, carefully placing them in a Ziploc bag from my backpack. These would be crucial evidence for the authorities, evidence that could finally give the Mitchell family the answers they deserved. I looked up at the sky through the forest canopy. It was still dark, but there was a faint brightness on the eastern horizon. It must have been around 4:30 a.m. The sun would rise in about an hour and a half. I knew what I had to do. I had to get back to my camp, gather all my gear, return to my truck and drive until I had cell service. Then I'd call the King County Sheriff's Department and report everything I'd found. They'd need to assemble a team to come out here, document the scene, and properly recover the evidence. But there was a problem. I was miles away from any road, deep in dense forest, and once I left this place, it would be extremely hard to find it again. The Olympic forests were vast and confusing, with no clear trails in this area. I needed to mark this spot somehow. I used my Garmin GPS to record the exact coordinates. Then I used my knife to carve distinct marks into several trees around, creating a pattern I could later describe to the search teams. I also stacked a few stones in an unnatural formation near the body, something clearly human-made. Before leaving, I looked one last time at the Bigfoot lying there. Despite what had happened, despite the tragedy this creature had caused, I felt a strange sadness. This was a magnificent being, probably one of the last of its kind. And it had died here, alone, sick from something its body couldn't process. Two tragedies, I thought. Sarah Mitchell and this creature, both victims of circumstances that should never have crossed paths. I turned and began walking back toward my camp, my mind still processing everything I had seen. The path through the dark forest felt different now. The shadows seemed deeper, the night sounds more ominous. I gripped my rifle tighter, every sense on high alert, because now I knew the truth. I knew these forests held secrets far greater than anyone imagined. And I was about to bring one of those secrets into the light. The hike back to my camp felt like an eternity. Every sound in the forest made my heart jump. The snap of a branch, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl. Everything felt amplified, charged with new meaning. I wasn't alone out here. I never had been. And that realization changed everything. When I finally reached my clearing, the sky was beginning to lighten with that gray, pre-dawn glow. The embers of my fire had completely died out, leaving only cold ash. My tent was exactly as I'd left it, but somehow it felt different now. Everything did. I wasted no time. I immediately started breaking camp, working with an efficiency born of years of experience and fueled by the urgency of what I'd discovered. The tent was down and packed in under 5 minutes. My sleeping bag was rolled and strapped to my pack. I retrieved my bear canister from the tree, packed my cooking gear, and completely buried the remnants of my fire. Normally, I'd be careful to leave no trace of my presence. Leave no trace was a principle I took seriously. But this time I cared more about speed. I needed to get out, get to a phone, report what I'd found. I slung my backpack over my shoulders, tightened the straps, grabbed my rifle, and started the trail back to where I'd parked my truck. The sky was steadily brightening, and soon I could see the path ahead without my headlamp. The 4-hour hike I'd made the day before now felt endless. Every passing minute I thought about the Mitchell family. They'd spent 3 weeks not knowing what happened to Sarah, 3 weeks of fading hope, sleepless nights, and every phone ring bringing the terror of bad news. And now I had answers for them, not the ones they wanted, not the happy ending they'd prayed for, but at least closure. At least certainty. I also thought about the wider implications of what I'd found. If the story got out, and it inevitably would, it would cause panic. People would start seeing Bigfoot not as mysterious, but harmless creatures, but as dangerous predators. There would be hunts, vigilante groups heading into the woods armed and determined to wipe out anything they found. But I knew that wasn't the whole story. The Bigfoot I'd found was clearly in abnormal circumstances. Injured, possibly sick, definitely not acting in line with the typical behavior of its kind. To condemn all of them because of one compromised individual would be like condemning all bears because one sick or wounded bear occasionally attacks a human. Reached my truck a little after 8 in the morning. The sun was fully above the horizon now, bathing the forest in golden light. I tossed my pack into the bed of the pickup, placed my rifle in the rack behind the seats, and climbed into the cab. My hands trembled slightly as I put the key in the ignition. The F-250's engine roared to life, breaking the silence of the forest. I carefully maneuvered, turning the truck onto the narrow logging road, and began driving back towards civilization. The road was rough, full of potholes and rocks, and I had to go slow to avoid damaging the suspension. It took nearly 45 minutes before I finally reached an area where my phone showed signal, 1 bar, then 2. I pulled over to the side of the road, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm and professional. My name is Marcus Webb, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm a licensed hunter, and I need to report. I've found evidence connected to the missing person case of Sarah Mitchell. There was a brief pause.
Sir, could you repeat that?
Sarah Mitchell, the woman who went missing in Olympic National Park 3 weeks ago. I found evidence, personal items belonging to her. I need to speak to someone from the King County Sheriff's Department immediately.
Sir, where are you located right now?
I gave her my approximate location on the highway, and she told me to stay where I was. An officer would be dispatched to my position. She kept me on the line, asking questions about exactly what I'd found, but I was vague with the details. This wasn't a conversation to have over the phone. It needed to happen in person with the proper investigators present. About 20 minutes later, a sheriff's department SUV appeared on the road, lights flashing. The vehicle stopped behind my truck and two officers got out. One was an older man, maybe in his late 50s, with short gray hair and a serious expression. The other was younger, probably in his early 30s, with a notepad already open in his hand. "Mr. Webb?" The older officer approached. "I'm Deputy Sheriff Tom Brennan, and this is Deputy Collins. We understand you have information regarding the Sarah Mitchell case." "Yes, sir," I replied. "But before I explain, I need to warn you that what I'm about to say is going to sound impossible. But I have physical evidence to back up everything I'm going to tell you." The two officers exchanged glances. Deputy Brennan nodded. "All right, Mr. Webb. Why don't we start from the beginning?" I took a deep breath and began to tell my story. I told them about my hunting trip, about waking up to the strange smell, about following the odor until I found the body in the forest. And then, seeing the skeptical look starting to appear on their faces, I said it plainly. I found a dead Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, and inside that creature's stomach, I found personal belongings of Sarah Mitchell. The silence that followed was heavy. Deputy Collins stopped writing and looked up, disbelief on his face. Deputy Brennan just studied me, his expression giving nothing away. "Mr. Webb," Brennan finally said, his voice carefully neutral, "are you aware that making a false report to the authorities is a crime?" "I'm aware, sir, and I'm not making a false report." I walked to the passenger door of my truck and grabbed the Ziploc bag containing the evidence I'd collected. "Here, this is a necklace I found. It has an inscription, 'To Sarah, with love, Mom and Dad, 2015. These are fragments of a red Columbia jacket, and this piece of fabric is from jeans." I handed the bag to Brennan. He took it carefully, examining the contents through the clear plastic. His expression changed. Recognition flashed in his eyes. "Collins," he said calmly, "grab the case photo from the car." The younger deputy ran back to the SUV and returned with a folder. He opened it, flipping through until he found a specific photo. It was a picture of Sarah Mitchell, taken before she disappeared. In the photo, she was smiling, wearing a red jacket, and around her neck was the heart-shaped pendant, now sitting in the evidence bag in Brennan's hand. "My God," Collins murmured. Brennan looked at me with a new intensity. "Mr. Webb, I'm going to need you to take us to the location where you found this, immediately." I marked the GPS coordinates, I said, "but I should warn you it's a long hike, at least 4 hours on foot from where I parked my truck, and the dirt road out there is pretty rough. We'll need appropriate vehicles, and we should probably wait until tomorrow morning to go with full daylight." Brennan shook his head. "No, this needs to happen now. The longer we wait, the more the scene can be compromised by wildlife or weather." He grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Deputy Brennan. I need a full investigative team mobilized for Olympic National Park. I'll also need search and rescue on standby. And contact the FBI. This is connected to the Mitchell case." Over the next 30 minutes, that remote stretch of highway turned into a hub of activity. More Sheriff's Department vehicles arrived, an FBI van pulled in, a team from the King County Medical Examiner was dispatched, and a group from Search and Rescue showed up with their off-road vehicles and hiking gear. I was questioned repeatedly by different people, each asking variations of the same questions. What exactly had I seen? How large was the creature? What condition was the body in? Where exactly had I found Sarah Mitchell's belongings? Had I touched anything else at the scene? Finally, Deputy Brennan decided we had enough personnel to proceed. He assigned a 6-person team to make the initial hike with me. Himself, Deputy Collins, 2 members of Search and Rescue, an FBI investigator named Agent Morrison, and a medical examiner named Dr. Chen. We all piled into our vehicles and formed a small convoy. I led in my F-250, followed by the others in their SUVs and pickups. I drove back along the highway and then turned onto the old logging road that led to my original starting point. The road was as bad as I remembered, maybe worse in daylight, when you could really see all the ruts and obstacles. We crawled along, our vehicles pitching and bouncing over the uneven surface. At one point, we had to stop and remove a fallen log blocking the way. At last, after nearly an hour of rough driving, we reached the place where I'd originally parked. We all got out and began prepping for the hike. The search and rescue team handed out extra walkie-talkies to everyone. Dr. Chen checked her medical kit. Agent Morrison verified the Glock on his hip. "All right," Deputy Brennan said, looking over the group. "Mr. Webb is going to lead us in. Keep a tight formation, stay alert, and if anyone sees or hears anything unusual, report it immediately. We treat this as a potential crime scene, so gloves on when we get there and don't touch anything. You don't absolutely have to." He turned to me. "Mr. Webb, lead the way." I nodded, adjusted my pack, and started into the forest. Behind me, I heard the footsteps of the other 6 following. And so, we began the long journey back to that impossible place where 2 tragedies intersected, where the line between legend and reality had dissolved, where answers lay that the world wasn't ready to hear. The hike through the forest was completely different this time. When I'd made the trek alone 2 days earlier, it had been peaceful, almost meditative. Now, with 6 other people behind me, the forest felt smaller, less magical. The natural quiet had been replaced by the sound of boots snapping twigs, gear rustling, and the occasional whispered exchange among the team. I led the group, using my GPS to retrace the route I'd taken. Deputy Brennan walked right behind me, followed by Agent Morrison. Dr. Chen stayed in the middle, flanked by the 2 search and rescue members, and Deputy Collins brought up the rear. "How much longer, Mr. Webb?" Brennan asked after about 2 hours of hiking. "Another 2 hours or so," I answered. "The terrain gets tougher from here. There's a stretch where we'll have to cross Whiskey Creek, and then a steep climb through an area with a lot of downed logs." Brennan nodded and relayed the information to the rest of the group over the walkie-talkie. We continued in silence for a while. I could feel the tension in the group rising the deeper we went into the forest. Agent Morrison kept his hand resting casually near his sidearm. The search and rescue members constantly scanned the woods around us, their trained eyes searching for anything out of place. When we finally reached Whiskey Creek, we took a short break. The water was low, just a few inches deep, running over smooth stones. We crossed one by one, using the larger rocks as steps. Dr. Chen slipped almost halfway through, but one of the search and rescue members, a big guy named Jake, caught her by the arm and helped her across safely. On the far side of the creek, the terrain became more challenging, just as I'd warned. Fallen trees blocked the path every few yards, forcing us to climb over or detour around them. Low pine branches snagged us as we passed. The forest floor was carpeted with dense ferns that rose to our waists in places. "How did you find this path in the dark?" Deputy Collins asked, a new respect in his voice. "I was following my nose," I replied. "The odor was impossible to miss." As if in response to my words, Agent Morrison suddenly stopped. "Wait, do you all smell that?" We all froze and inhaled. There it was, that unmistakable scent of decomposition, still strong even after more than 24 hours since I had last been here. "We're close," I said. "Very close." Brennan grabbed his walkie-talkie. "Team, get ready. We're approaching the location. Dr. Chen, stay in the middle. Morrison, you and I will move up front with Webb. Collins, you and Search and Rescue hold the perimeter." We rearranged our formation and moved forward more cautiously. The smell grew stronger with every step. I could see the expressions of the other team members changing as the stench hit them full force. Dr. Chen pulled a surgical mask from her pack and put it on. Others followed suit, using bandanas or masks they had brought. And then, through the trees ahead, I saw the sight. The 2 massive trees between which the body lay. The pile of stones I had made as a marker. The cuts I had carved into the bark of the surrounding trees. "There," I said, pointing. Brennan raised his hand, signaling everyone to stop. He and Morrison moved forward with me, while the rest of the team stayed behind, waiting. We approached slowly, carefully, and then there it was, exactly as I had left it. The massive body of the Bigfoot still lying on its back, arms outstretched, the abdominal incision I had made now attracting flies despite the cold October air. "My God," Morrison whispered. His hand had gone instinctively to his weapon, but he didn't draw it. He just stood there, staring in absolute disbelief. Brennan said nothing for a long moment. He just looked, his eyes traveling over the body from head to toe, taking in every detail. Finally, he grabbed his walkie-talkie with slightly trembling hands. "Team, we've confirmed the location. And I need everyone to understand what we're about to process here is unusual. I expect absolute professionalism from everyone. Dr. Chen, you can move in now. Collins Search and Rescue set up a 50-yard perimeter and start documenting the surrounding area. Look for any additional evidence, footprints, signs of struggle, anything. Dr. Chen stepped forward, her expression professional, but her eyes wide behind her glasses. She knelt beside the body, pulling on latex gloves. For several minutes, she just examined visually, not touching anything yet. Decomposition is consistent with death occurring 10 to 14 days ago, she finally said, her voice muffled behind the surgical mask. Cause of death? I'll need a proper necropsy to determine, but I see no obvious external trauma. The abdominal opening here, she pointed to the incision I had made, was done post-mortem, likely within the last 24 hours, based on tissue exposure. I did that, I admitted. I had to know. I had to check. Dr. Chen didn't judge me. She just nodded. Understandable, given the circumstances. She leaned closer to the opening, using a small flashlight to peer inside. And there's definitely organic matter here that's inconsistent with the creature's biology. Tissue, synthetic materials. I'll need proper time to catalog everything. But visually, I can confirm the presence of foreign objects in the digestive tract. Agent Morrison had stepped a few feet away and was speaking urgently into his satellite phone. I could hear fragments of his conversation, Yes, confirmed. No, it's not a hoax. I'll need a full team here, and we need to keep this contained. Brennan came closer to me. Mr. Webb, I'll need you to show me exactly where you found each item you collected. And then I'll need a formal statement from you detailing everything that happened in precise chronological order. For the next 30 minutes, I guided Brennan through every step of my investigation the previous night. I showed him exactly where I had found the pendant, where the clothing fragments had been, where I had seen the other evidence. He documented everything meticulously, taking photographs with a professional camera, making detailed notes, collecting additional samples using proper evidence preservation techniques. Meanwhile, Dr. Chen continued her preliminary examination of the body. She measured the length, 8 feet 7 inches from head to toe. She examined the hands and feet, documenting their unique bone structure. She inspected the teeth, noting the unusual mix of carnivorous and herbivorous traits. She examined the scar on the leg that I had noticed, agreeing with my assessment that it appeared to be from some kind of trap. The search and rescue members periodically returned with findings from the surrounding area. Jake had found several large footprints in the mud near a small creek about 100 yards away. They took plaster casts of the impressions. Another member, a woman named Sarah, ironically sharing the same name as the victim, found what looked like a temporary resting site, an area where vegetation had been flattened as if something large had lain there. Deputy Collins found something especially disturbing. About 200 yards to the north, he located what appeared to be additional remnants of camping gear. A blue North Face backpack, torn and damaged, but still recognizable. He brought it back in an evidence bag, and when Brennan carefully unzipped it, we found a driver's license inside a small inner pocket. The photo on the license was of Sarah Mitchell, smiling, her green eyes bright and hopeful. The license was issued in 2021, listing an address in Port Angeles. There were also credit cards, $47 in cash, and a folded photo of Sarah with 2 older people who were presumably her parents. Brennan held the wallet carefully, his jaw tight. That confirms it, he said quietly. We'll need to notify the family. The afternoon wore on as the team methodically documented everything. Agent Morrison had called for additional reinforcements, and by around 4 p.m., 6 more people arrived at the site, more FBI agents, another medical examiner, and a wildlife specialist from the University of Washington that Brennan had managed to bring in on short notice. The wildlife specialist, a professor named Dr. Richard Hartley, spent nearly an hour examining the Bigfoot's body, taking measurements, collecting hair and tissue samples, photographing every detail. He was simultaneously fascinated and scientifically focused. This is going to rewrite everything we thought we knew about primates in North America, he told Brennan. The skeletal structure is unique, features shared with both Gigantopithecus and modern hominids, but with distinct adaptations. And the size. It suggests a completely separate evolutionary lineage that survived in isolation for millions of years. But his scientific fascination was tempered when he examined the stomach contents and the implications of what had happened. Predatory behavior toward humans is not typical for great apes, he observed. Even gorillas, which are massively strong, are primarily herbivorous and avoid confrontation. For this to have happened, the creature would have to have been under extreme stress, hunger, illness, or chronic pain from injury. He examined the scar on the leg more closely. This wound was significant. It likely severely limited the creature's mobility. If it couldn't hunt or forage normally, that could have driven it to desperation. And desperate animals are unpredictable. As the sun began to set, Brennan made the difficult decision that we would need to camp there overnight. It was too late and too dangerous to attempt the long hike back in the dark with all the equipment and evidence we'd collected. Besides, we needed to secure the scene until we could. Arrange proper transport for the body. The search and rescue team set up several tents in a small clearing about 50 yards from the body, far enough to escape the worst of the odor, but close enough to keep the scene protected. They established a rotating watch system with 2 people awake at all times throughout the night. As we ate military MREs around a small campfire, the conversation inevitably turned to the implications of what we had discovered. "How are we going to handle this publicly?" Deputy Collins asked. "I mean, when this leaks, and it will, it's going to cause mass panic." Agent Morrison shook his head. "This is way above my pay grade to decide. The FBI will have to coordinate with multiple federal agencies, the National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife, maybe even Homeland Security. And we'll need to consult scientific experts to determine whether there are others of these creatures in the area, whether they pose an ongoing threat." "They don't," I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. This was an abnormal situation. A wounded, desperate creature that made a terrible choice. That doesn't define the entire species. Condemning all Bigfoot because of this would be like condemning all bears because a sick one occasionally attacks someone. Dr. Hartley nodded in agreement. "Mr. Webb is correct. In fact, what's remarkable about this discovery isn't that it happened once, but that apparently it has never happened before. If there's a population of these creatures living in these forests for generations, and all evidence suggests there is, then the fact that we have essentially 0 documented cases of aggressive encounters suggests that their normal behavior is to avoid humans entirely." The conversation went on, late into the night as everyone processed the impossible implications of the day. Eventually, we began turning into the tents. I volunteered to take the first watch along with Jake, the search and rescue member. We sat near the fire, keeping it fed with dry twigs, our eyes scanning the darkness around us. The night forest was alive with sound. Owls, small mammals moving through the undergrowth, the wind whispering through the trees. "Were you scared?" Jake asked after a long silence. "When you first found it in the dark?" "Yes," I admitted. "But more than fear, I think it was awe and sadness. Awe at standing face to face with something that shouldn't exist. Sadness because I knew this story wasn't going to end well for anyone involved." We sat in silence for a while longer. Then Jake said something that stayed with me. "You saved that family, you know. The Mitchell family. They're finally going to have answers. They'll be able to find closure, to start processing their grief properly. It doesn't bring her back, but it's something. It matters." He was right. And as I sat there in that dark forest, guarding the remains of 2 lives that had ended tragically, I felt the weight of responsibility that came with what I had discovered. This was going to change everything, our understanding of the natural world, our relationship with these wild forests, perhaps even how we saw our own place on this planet. But for now, that night my job was simple: keep the site secure, make sure the evidence was preserved, and in the morning, begin the long process of bringing this impossible truth to the world. The night passed slowly. I did my shift on watch, then was relieved by Deputy Collins and one of the FBI agents. I tried to sleep in the tent I was sharing with Deputy Brennan and Agent Morrison, but sleep came in short, uneasy bursts. My mind kept replaying everything that had happened, all the implications of what we'd found. When dawn finally came, casting gray light through the canopy, the entire team was already awake. No one had slept particularly well. Dr. Chen was brewing instant coffee on a small portable stove, and the smell helped cut through some of the night's tension. "Morning," Brennan said as he stepped out of his tent. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, but his demeanor was all business. "We've got a long day ahead." "Morrison, what's the plan for transport?" Agent Morrison had spent part of the early morning on his satellite phone, coordinating with his superiors. "An FBI helicopter is en route. They'll land in the nearest clearing. We identified one about half a mile southeast of here, but the body is far too large and heavy for standard air transport. We're going to have to rig some kind of reinforced stretcher, and it's going to take at least 8 people to carry it to the extraction point." Dr. Hartley, the wildlife specialist, was eager to take a few more measurements and collect additional samples before the body was moved. He spent the next hour working meticulously, with Dr. Chen assisting. They gathered hair samples from different parts of the body, tissue samples, even attempted to collect some fluid that could be tested for DNA analysis. "This will keep labs busy for years," Dr. Hartley murmured as he worked. "Decades, maybe. Every sample will tell us something about the biology, diet, and evolutionary history of these creatures. This is as significant as the discovery of the coelacanth, or any other species we once thought extinct." While the scientists worked, the rest of us began constructing the transport frame. Using strong ropes, tarps, and aluminum poles from the search and rescue equipment, we built a sturdy stretcher. We tested it for weight, several of us climbing onto it at once to make sure it would hold. By around 10 a.m., we heard the distant sound of helicopter rotors. Morrison confirmed over the radio it was the FBI extraction team arriving at the designated landing zone. That meant it was time to move. With extreme care and considerable effort, 8 of us, me, Jake, the other 2 search and rescue members, Brennan Morrison, and 2 additional FBI agents, maneuvered the Bigfoot's body onto the stretcher. The weight was incredible. Even with 8 strong men, lifting it was a challenge. "On my count," Jake instructed, taking the lead. "Everyone lift together. 1, 2, 3, lift." We heaved in unison, grunting with the effort. The stretcher held, thankfully. We began the long, grueling trek toward the extraction point, rotating in groups of 4, carrying at a time while the others rested. It took nearly 2 hours to cover that half-mile. The terrain was rough, the stretcher awkward, and we had to stop often to adjust our grip and rest our aching arms. But at last, we emerged into a natural clearing where a large FBI Bell 412 helicopter sat waiting, its rotors silent. A full team was waiting, more agents, technicians, even a film crew documenting everything for official records. When they saw what we were carrying, there was a collective moment of stunned silence. "My God," one of the technicians whispered. "It's real. It's actually real." We carefully loaded the body into the helicopter. It had been modified for this mission, with most of the seats removed to make room for cargo. The body was secured with multiple straps, and Dr. Chen and Dr. Hartley boarded along with it to monitor during transport. "Where is it going?" I asked Morrison. "To a secure government facility at Joint Base Lewis McChord," he replied. "We have a lab there equipped to handle this. Maximum security, cleared personnel only, and we can control the information while we decide how to proceed." The helicopter lifted off, its rotors whipping up a gale that forced us to step back. We watched as it ascended, turned south, and disappeared over the trees, carrying with it one of the most significant discoveries in modern history. The rest of us made the long hike back to our vehicles. We were all exhausted, physically and emotionally drained. The trek took the rest of the afternoon, and it was nearly 6 in the evening when we finally reached the parking area. Brennan pulled me aside before we parted ways. "Mr. Webb, I'll need you to come by the station tomorrow to give a full formal statement. And I have to emphasize, everything about this investigation is now classified. You can't speak about it to anyone. Not family, not friends, no one. We're talking national security here," I nodded. "I understand." "Good," he shook my hand. "You did the right thing reporting this. A lot of hunters would have just, I don't know, kept quiet, or worse, tried to profit from it somehow. You gave that family the closure they deserved." "That means something?" I drove home in a daze. My house was a small ranch outside Sequim, Washington, about 2 hours from where I'd been. I arrived around 8:30 p.m., parked my truck, and just sat in the cab for a long time, staring at my house through the window. How was I supposed to go back to normal life after this? How could I just resume routine hunts, guide fishing clients, pretend the world was still what I thought it was? Finally, I forced myself out of the truck and went inside. I fed my dog, a brown Labrador retriever named Copper, who'd been staying with my neighbor. I took a long hot shower, washing off days of forest grime. Then I made a simple sandwich I could barely eat and collapsed into bed. The next few days were a blur of meetings and interrogations. I gave my full statement at the King County Sheriff's Department, going over every detail multiple times for different investigators. I was interviewed separately by the FBI. I had to sign a stack of non-disclosure agreements and national security documents. Meanwhile, I learned from Brennan that the Mitchell family had been notified. Sarah's belongings had been confirmed through DNA, giving them certainty that she was gone. They were finally able to grieve properly, to plan a memorial, to begin to find closure. The public statement was tightly controlled. The King County Sheriff's Department released a brief press note. Personal belongings belonging to Sarah Mitchell were recovered in a remote area of Olympic National Park. Based on forensic evidence, we have determined that Mrs. Mitchell perished in an unfortunate wildlife encounter. The investigation is closed. No mention of Bigfoot. No mention of the true circumstances. Officially, it was just another lost hiker tragedy, the kind that occasionally happens in the vast wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. But within scientific and government circles, I knew it was causing massive ripples. Dr. Hartley had called me once, speaking quickly and in code, letting me know that DNA analysis was underway and that the preliminary results were revolutionary. The creature was definitively an unknown primate species, with genetic divergence from known lineages dating back millions of years. 3 weeks after the discovery, I received an unexpected visit. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled into my driveway, and 2 men in suits stepped out. One was Agent Morrison. The other was an older man he introduced simply as Dr. Stevens from the Department of the Interior. We sat in my living room, Copper lying suspiciously at my feet. "Mr. Webb," Dr. Stevens began, "thank you for meeting with us. I'm here representing an interagency task force that's been formed in response to your discovery. We've been tasked with determining whether there is a population of Sasquatch living within our national parks and forests, and if so, how to protect them while ensuring public safety." He leaned forward. "We need your help. Your experience as a tracker, your knowledge of these forests, and frankly, the fact that you've already encountered one of these beings make you invaluable. We're assembling a field research team, and we'd like you to be part of it." I looked between the 2 men. "You're offering me a job hunting Bigfoot?" "Not hunting," Dr. Stevens corrected. "Studying, documenting, protecting. These creatures, if more exist, represent an invaluable biological heritage. They may also represent risks, especially if there are other injured or diseased individuals like the one you found. We need to understand their population, their movement patterns, their behavior. And we need to do it discreetly without causing public panic or attracting trophy hunters." I thought about it. I thought about that creature lying dead in the forest, a victim of both circumstance and nature. I thought about Sarah Mitchell and about everyone who loved these wilderness areas. I thought about the fragile balance between humans and the wild. "I'll do it," I said, "but on one condition. Whatever we find, whatever Sasquatch we encounter, they're protected, no matter what. They won't be hunted, captured for zoos, or exploited. They stay free in their forests." Dr. Stevens smiled. "Mr. Webb, that's exactly the attitude we need on this team. You have a deal." And so began a new chapter of my life. I spent the next several months working with scientists, conservationists, and law enforcement in one of the most unusual secret operations the U.S. government has ever conducted. We set up trail cameras in remote areas. We analyzed footprints and signs. We collected and tested environmental DNA samples. And yes, we found evidence of more Sasquatch. Not many. The estimates suggested perhaps 50 to 100 individuals scattered across the vast forests of the Pacific Northwest. a small, vulnerable population that had survived by keeping their distance from humans and living deep within the wildest corners of the wilderness. We implemented quiet protections. Certain areas were discreetly designated off-limits for development. Patrol patterns were adjusted to give the creatures more space. Illegal traps were removed more aggressively. As for the creature I found, the necropsy confirmed what we had suspected. The leg wound had become infected, causing chronic pain and severely limited mobility. Analysis of the stomach contents showed clear signs of malnutrition. The creature had been unable to hunt or forage effectively. There were also indications of systemic toxicity, likely from consuming processed human food its body couldn't metabolize properly. It was a perfect storm of factors that led to tragedy. A suffering, desperate creature making a decision that went against every instinct of its kind, and it cost both its life and Sarah Mitchell's. Today, 3 years later, I still do this work. I still spend weeks in the forests, tracking signs, monitoring populations, ensuring these magnificent beings can continue to exist without human interference. I've never seen another living Sasquatch. I found footprints, signs of passage, and heard distant sounds that might have been their calls. But they remain elusive, as they always have, ghosts of the forests that survived by avoiding us. And maybe that's for the best. Some things are meant to stay mysterious, to live in the shadows between the known and the unknown. My job isn't to drag these beings into the light, but to ensure the shadows where they live remain untouched and safe. The Mitchell family eventually reached out to me. It was a difficult conversation, but a necessary one. They thanked me for giving them closure, for not walking away when I could have. Sarah's father told me something I still carry with me. You gave our daughter back to us. Not alive, but you gave us the truth. And truth, no matter how painful, is a gift. There are nights when I'm out in the woods, sitting beside a campfire, when I think about that night in October, when I stumbled upon the impossible. I think about the choices I made, the lives that were changed, the secrets I now carry. The world will never know the full truth. People will keep debating whether Bigfoot is real, sharing blurry photos and shaky videos, telling campfire stories. And beneath all of that, a small group of us will continue working quietly to protect these creatures, to ensure they have a place in this rapidly shrinking world. Because in the end, that's what this is about. Not about proving they exist or satisfying human curiosity. It's about recognizing that this planet is still big enough, still wild enough, to hold mysteries. And some mysteries are too precious to solve. They must be protected, preserved for future generations to marvel at. I never believed in Bigfoot, but then I found one and discovered something that changed my understanding of the world. I learned that the line between legend and reality is thinner than we think. I learned that our forests hold secrets we are only beginning to understand. And I learned that sometimes the greatest discoveries come with the greatest responsibilities. What happened in that remote forest in October 2023 was a tragedy on many levels, but it was also a revelation, a reminder that we share this planet with beings we barely comprehend, and that we have an obligation to be guardians, not conquerors, of the wild places that remain. That's my story. It's the truth of what happened, of what I discovered, and of the path my life took afterward. I may never be able to share it publicly. I may be bound by agreements and classifications, but I know what's real. And wherever those surviving Sasquatch are, deep in the forests of the Pacific Northwest, I hope they are safe, undisturbed, continuing their ancient, mysterious lives far from human eyes, because some things are meant to stay wild. And thanks to the unintentional sacrifice of one creature and the tragic loss of Sarah Mitchell, we now have the wisdom and the will to keep it that way.